Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. You know, in theory, the Department of Justice should be there to protect our constitutional rights. Unfortunately, when we look at them in practice, they are often doing quite the opposite. And nothing could be worse than a heavy dose of DOJ with a little ATF sprinkled in it. But perhaps those winds are changing. Perhaps the tide is completely shifting. And perhaps those that are trying to advance the cause of the Second Amendment are about to gain the most powerful ally we've ever had. I'm not making it up, and I'll explain to you in just a moment how it works. So today, let's spend a few minutes and let's talk about the most powerful tool gun rights can ever use. Okay, America, this is what we're talking about. We are talking about a seismic shift in the way the Department of Justice is conducting business as it relates to the Second Amendment rights of lawful and responsible Americans nationwide. Now, let's go back in our time machine because it's only been a little more than 100 days. But let us all remember that after the Matt Gaetz bubble burst almost immediately, along came the name of Pam Bondi. And many in the Second Amendment community completely crapped their pants over Pam Bondi because they believed that she had a record of not being good on the Second Amendment. I'm not criticizing those that were critical of her. I'm not criticizing the record that they were relying upon. We took a little bit more of a neutral approach here. We weren't big Pam Bondi fanboys, but we also weren't throwing as many stones at her at others. But since the time that she has become the Attorney General, let us go back and remember that in just a little more than 100 days, we've seen the following: the recall of ATF's zero tolerance rule, the recall of ATF's engaged in the business rule, numerous and positive personnel decisions, the executive order for President Trump and the creation of the Second Amendment Task Force, the decision to drop the short barrel rifle charges in the matter of United States v. Taranto, and the rumor that the pistol brace rule may be recalled. The amicus brief authored by the Department of Justice in the case of Wolford v. Lopez, which we said was a monumental occurrence for the Department of Justice to weigh in on behalf of a petitioner to the United States Supreme Court trying to overturn Hawaii's crazy and very unconstitutional gun law. But there's another case that hasn't gotten a lot of publicity, but you need to be aware of as well, and that's the case of New York versus Arm. Now, New York State, like many of the dirty dozen states, has laws that ban the sale, manufacture, and importation of unfinished frames and receivers, or what some people like to call 80% lowers. This law was being challenged after the plaintiffs here, obviously, were convicted of doing exactly that. And the United States Department of Justice had weighed in previously and joined sides with the state of New York, in furtherance of these restrictions. And of course, that would have been consistent with then Department of Justice's stance on unfinished frames and receivers, or what ultimately became the Vanderstock case before the United States Supreme Court. But since the time that the United States Department of Justice got themselves involved in that case, we've had a significant change, not only in the White House, but also at the Department of Justice. And now we have learned that the United States government is going to withdraw from that case. And as a matter of fact, in their motion to withdraw from New York versus Arm, the Solicitor General stated, although the Supreme Court provided some clarity on the regulatory question of how best to apply the Gun Control Act to unfinished frames and receivers, this interpretation should not serve as a basis for punishing gun manufacturers for conduct that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives considered lawful at the time of the sale. Thus, the government no longer wishes to be party to this litigation. So, in just a little over 100 days now, we have seen the United States Department of Justice do a complete 180 and go from complete and utter civilian disarmament to now actually fighting to preserve the inalienable rights of Americans nationwide. And this is why it is perhaps the most powerful tool that we could ever have on our side. Number one, despite the fact that content creators like myself will sometimes be critical of the arguments that the United States Department of Justice argues, the truth be told, they have some incredibly talented lawyers working for them, okay? And one need look not very far to take a look at what happens with people who work for the United States Department of Justice and then oftentimes move on to other positions. They do produce very talented lawyers there, and that cannot be debated. But the biggest reason, America, why the Department of Justice can become our biggest ally in the advancement of our Second Amendment rights is really simple. They got the deepest pockets imaginable. They absolutely, literally have, no bottom line, right? They have government deep pockets. And you talk to anyone who's ever been involved in Second Amendment litigation, that plaintiff who's willing to be the tip of the spear on behalf of all of you. Either they are independently wealthy and they can fund the litigation themselves, or they go bankrupt during the litigation, or the organization or organizations that are doing the litigation on their behalf are basically doing the work at no cost or pro bono. This is a very expensive form of litigation. All litigation, unfortunately, is incredibly expensive. And the ability to have talented lawyers from a massively large law firm that literally have the deepest pockets humanly imaginable is in fact the best legal ally that our gun rights can ever have. Listen, I recognize that a lot of you were a little skittish about Attorney General Bondi, and I again recognize why. But I'd be interested in hearing from you down in the comment section below. Where do you come in on her right now? Where do you come in on what's going on with the Department of Justice? Where do you come in on what's happening with the ATF? I recognize that for some of you, things are not happening fast enough, but in many ways, this is like trying to turn around an aircraft carrier. But I think if we're really honest with ourselves, we can honestly say it's been a pretty good 107 to 108 days, hasn't it? Okay, listen, if you guys got any other questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights, you guys should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now. But if you don't, that's okay. That information down there in the description box. If you got an idea for a video we should be doing around here, cool. Tell us all about it by clicking on that link right there. If you want to subscribe to the monthly newsletter, the ability to do that is down there in the description box. And then finally, and most importantly, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.